GM DGens, and welcome to Numbers Therapy, episode 24. Today's episode title is Why Sales is the Millionaire Metaverse Opportunity. Again, a little bit clickbaity with the title, and I guess we'll get into that a little bit more today and why it's interesting. First off, a little bit of background work. So continue to check us out on Spotify. We're streaming. And like I always say, the suggestion is to put them all together and listen to the episodes all together as there's continuity. And we're trying to be really, thoughtful in terms of how we organize the episodes and making sure that there's progression and that there's value in listening to them holistically. Do want to continue to get feedback from everyone. And Poop, in fact, sent out a feedback survey, I think into announcements, if I'm not mistaken, maybe also into VC1. So if everyone could take, a little bit of time, if you wouldn't mind, and fill out that form. It provides really useful feedback on numbers therapy in general, just so we can make it as good of a product as possible. And if you fill that out, you will be entered into a couple raffles for allow lists as well. So a little bit of a bonus there, but I'd certainly be appreciative too, because we're just trying to make this product and podcast as awesome for everyone as possible. And then lastly, equally with our guests, if you or someone you think would be a very good guest to have on Numbers Therapy, either because of their background or a specific angle or whatever, please make sure to fill out a form or just pass it across directly. And I believe there also you'll be compensated with allow list if the person winds up coming on an episode as well, and equally if that person's you too. So, okay. So for framing purposes, the purpose of Numbers Therapy, of course, is to talk through the macro and bring on and showcase our experts in here. More specifically, so that everyone can understand how the big pieces fit together, make better decisions with NFTs and other investments using a balanced perspective, learn about or from some of our people in here and get different perspectives, and learn about different areas and opportunities out there as well and different ways of thinking. And today's episode will be no different than that. Also, I always say as a reminder, there are different levels in here listening live. And it's really important that everybody's along for the full ride. I guess the same thing goes for the recorded audience too, but it's very important everyone's along for the full ride. If you have any questions along the way, please drop them into guest questions, and I'll make sure to weave them in if it's something that I think needs to be answered, earlier, so that everyone can follow through the conversation. That's just very important. Equally, if you have more intermediate or advanced questions, just drop them in too, and we'll do our best to answer them too. And then lastly, an important note and disclaimer: none of what you hear in here is financial advice. It's all opinions. So, without further ado, and on to today's guest and episode. In addition to having one of the most distinct voices in the metaverse, our guest today has a pretty excellent pre-Web3 background that is translated very effectively into the Web3 world. So you might be thinking another dev, designer, to which we'd say, nope. His background is actually in enterprise sales within software, which for anyone not familiar with enterprise sales just means, large institutions and big deals. But the parallel here is the continuation of tech sales with a bit of a different canvas. And given that he was around for the rise of Web 2 tech sales and has an excellent background within the Web 3 space as a trader, student himself and a deal maker, we're going to delve into the, bit surprising and controversial reason why Web 3 sales is not the commonly spoken about huge opportunity within the space, when in reality it presents a really good opportunity. He hails from San Diego. He may even frequent Tijuana occasionally as well. He's become a great friend to see within MVHQ and at conferences. So let's please welcome JohnnySolana to the stage, everyone. Johnny, how's it going today, man?
Good. Thanks for having me, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. About a nice overcast day here in San Diego.
And can you confirm whether the Tijuana rumors are true or not? You don't have to say if you don't want to. It's okay.
Back in my younger years, that was a thing. Not so much anymore.
Okay, fair enough. So we'll start where we always do. Let's start with background a little bit. So can you talk about your pre-Web3 days? Where did you start and kind of progress to? Where was your focus?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I've been in IT for over 22 years. About 18 of those years I spent in sales, but I started my career right out of college. I graduated from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. It's a state school here on the coast of California, and was lucky enough to enter the workforce right during the .com era. So everybody was getting jobs in IT, whether you were an art major, a history major, an economics major, computer science. And I just happened to find a job with Oracle Corporation that hired me before I was even graduated. I had had an offer, and they had it was much different back then, where they had a whole like training program where they would find a role for you. They just wanted to get you into the company, and you would go through a round robin type of, you do some sales work training, you do development work training, you do marketing training, and I just happened to fall into the consulting category. That was what my aptitude was after going through about a 9-month boot camp of different courses and different shadowing opportunities within the company. So they put me into the consulting arm, which was more technical consulting. So I had a technical aptitude. I minored in computer science back in college. So I did have some minor coding skills, specifically around SQL databases and things of that nature. So I was actually, started off more on the technical side of things, where I would go around to companies that bought our software and either modify it, customize it for them. I was an installer for some time, and it was just a really great way to learn, because of, there were big teams that got sent out to big projects. I was at the University of Santa Clara implementing a solution for them and customizing it on a team of about 10 people, where I was kind of the junior person, and just really enjoyed, getting things to work. I love to figure out how things work, under the hood, and tweak things. And so I got very good at stored procedure programming in the SQL databases, and it was a lot of fun. But and it, it paid decent back then. But what I was learning was that all the money was in sales, and I saw all the big sales guys making all the big bucks. So I slowly tried to get into that realm within the company. And, after a year or two, I moved into sales engineering, which is more of, the technical knowledge person on a sales team, where you have like an account executive who handles the relationship. And then you've got like a sales engineer that would be more answering any of the technical questions with the CIO or the sales the IT managers from the customer. And basically, I found that a lot more fun myself, not only because of the money, but because there was a lot more interpersonal relationships you could build with your customers. They kind of what they call in the industry is becoming the trusted advisor, where they would call you if they have a problem, even if it was maybe outside of your product or your area of knowledge. They would bounce ideas around you. And I really like the whole networking aspect. And I would spend time I had U.S. coverage, so I was in New York. I was in, for a month or a couple of weeks. Then I'd go to Chicago and Dallas, and I kind of traveled the world. And I was in my 20s, and it was all in the company dime. It was great times. And then I decided to join a startup because this was right before the bubble burst. I'm dating myself, but back in like 2001, 2002. I joined a startup where it was about 200 people. It was a software company, and I joined their sales engineering team, and was making some big deals the first couple months. And we had pre-IPO stock, and we were valued at $1 billion, I think, back in the time, even though we had no sales. And the bubble burst, and so I went to being a millionaire on paper. Not being able to sell because the stock lockup period to, basically I was underwater because I had early exercised my options. So it was quite a wake up call. And, after that company it got bought out by another company. I decided to look around, and I really wanted to move into account management because that's where the big bucks are. If you're an account executive or an account manager, some places call it, you're basically the point person between the company and the customer. You handle the relationships, you handle any issues. And even though you've got support teams like customer support, you've got consultants at your fingertips. Like when something goes wrong, the customer's calling you, you're the face. So I really wanted that kind of responsibility. So I was lucky enough to pick up some Microsoft project. For those of you who are any project managers on the call would know of Microsoft Project. And I was lucky enough, there was an opening at Microsoft. They needed a salesperson who knew Microsoft Project. And they interviewed a bunch of people, and I had happened to pick that skill up because that was a tool that the startup used quite heavily and they actually embedded it in their software solution. So I had a lot of intimate knowledge of Microsoft Project. When I interviewed, they said, you're the only person that we've interviewed that has any type of sales experience, even though you're an engineer, with the Microsoft Project that we've interviewed. So I got hired on as an account executive specifically to sell Microsoft Project to certain customers in what they call the consumer space, which are big enterprise customers, like big names like banks, like Bank of the West, Bank of America. I was at Wells Fargo. I had Qualcomm. I had Petco. So I had a bunch of these big customers where I was selling Microsoft Project as part of the Office suite to them. And during that time, I spent about 10 years at Microsoft. I moved on to different roles within the company. I was actually a Office 365 account executive before Office 365 was even a thing. It was called BPOS, Business Productivity Online Services. So for those of you who know IT well, back in the day before Office 365, there was an online mail program called Exchange Online, which was called BPOS, Business Product, part of the BPOS suite. So I sold that for a while, and I had a great time at Microsoft. I spent 10 years there. I actually moved into a management role for a bit, where I took on. I managed a group of inside sales reps. Inside sales reps are those folks who just cold call and try to find new opportunities where we could sell into, and then they'd bring me in to actually handle those meetings with the customers. I did enjoy management, but it really wasn't my forte. I learned probably about after a year and a half, that it was something I wasn't interested in. There was a lot of Excel spreadsheet kind of watching and entering. I liked, managing people. I thought it was great to take kind of more folks that were on the associate or lower level and see them grow and help them. But I was not good at disciplining people, or kind of, I was a little bit too much of a micromanager or a macro manager, and let people kind of do their own thing. And I was not good at really coming down when it needed to make sure things are getting done in the right way. But I did enjoy my time doing that. But I decided to move back into more what they call IC, or individual contributor role, which so I moved back as an account manager. And then I did that for a number of years with some other big companies. Symantec Corporation, I sold their cybersecurity suite as an account manager to customers. Also in the commercial space, I had Oracle as one of my customers, one of my former employers, ironically enough. I had, what was it at the time? Facebook. I had some other customers back when they were in their infancy. So it was really nice because you built a lot of connections.
Yeah.
And these deal sizes were pretty large. I mean, we're talking Microsoft. You're talking some of the deals I sold were $5 million, upwards to $10 million when I was selling BPOS. So you're talking about some big money, big commissions. Great way to network. And then, kind of as my career evolved, I decided to bump around some other companies, just either due to money or opportunity. Most recently, I actually retired from Cisco Systems as a senior account executive, covering all the what they call SLED accounts, and that's state, local, and education accounts in Southern California. So I covered Los Angeles Unified School District, the County of San Diego County Library, libraries. I covered University of San Diego, UCSD, all those type of entities.
So for anybody listening right now, by the way, that's like, okay, I mean, this is, excellent context, right? Lots of places. I mean, what we should be hearing first off is this guy has a lot of experience with sales and that side of things, right? So we're trying to lay the foundation here, of course, which he's doing an awesome job on. I guess, too, we got this bonus also about exercising your options early and how that could be a mistake, too. Yeah. Surprise bonus. But point is that he's had a very deep career in sales. And so obviously what we're going to be able to delve into today is the opportunity that exists here, right? Having been in the dot-com phase, which many of us weren't, myself included, actually. Like I missed it by a couple of years. He was around to see that and see the rise of that, right? We're in a similar phase right now within Web3, with it being nascent. And I know everybody always makes like the obvious parallel from the dot-com rise to Web3 because they just want to say how exponential it's going to be and all that good stuff. It's like the obvious thing that everybody says. But there is a parallel that exists, right? I mean, it is tech driven, it is innovation driven. So there is just tons of opportunity. So I think we're going to be able to get to that today. Johnny, question for you related to what you're saying. With your early sales days, were you on the cold calling side of things, the warm calling side of things? I think you touched on this a little bit, but obviously we're generally talking here across all your different roles. But did you touch all phases of sales, would you say?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when I first started as at Microsoft as an account, kind of associate account, what they call product sales representative, I did a lot of cold calling where I would just, and mind you, cold calling for Microsoft's a little different because everybody's heard of you, everybody knows you, everybody pretty much owns you, at least one of your products, most likely. So I wouldn't exactly call it cold calling from a product perspective, or a company perspective, but from a personal perspective, they didn't know who I was. They may have not had a need for Microsoft Project, for example, when I was a product sales rep for that product. And so you really did have to do a lot of hunting where it's like, okay, we would find, I would go to, we had certain databases that had, I'd look for roles within companies using like things like LinkedIn and find the project managers. Who are the senior project managers? And are they using Microsoft Project or are they using a competitor? And that's how I would get introduced and really try to find opportunities. Like, well, why aren't you using Microsoft? You guys already have a great relationship with us. Here are the benefits to why our tool's the best. And you really had to sell yourself along with the product when doing that. It was a lot of phone calling.
Yeah. So in the Microsoft example, like you said, it's a well-known company. Even at the time you're working there, it's a well-known company, right? Going back maybe to like Oracle, which is a little bit earlier, a little bit more .com days, or even like the startup you worked at afterwards. What was the sales experience like then? Was it very Wild Westy in the scheme of like a low percentage of the people you were calling on, knew about, what Oracle did, for instance, or even technology, or I guess eventually cloud services, things like that. Like how much education was needed in the market? And of course, like the reason I'm trying to ask this is I'm trying to lay the parallel so we can cross into Web3 and kind of what the Web3 space is like at some point. So was it pretty Wild Westy originally, where it just required a lot of education, and therefore that's where some of the opportunity came from too?
Absolutely. So when I would jump to the startup, that was right during the .com era, which was very wild, Wild West. And there's a lot of parallels to what's going on in Web3 now, because there were so many companies that were startups. Nobody knew what they did. There wasn't, people are a lot more tech savvy now than they were back then. So you had to do a lot of education, and there were so many crazy names with all the different companies popping up. I mean, people were like, at first, like, what is Yahoo? Like, that's not a name of a company. That makes no sense. So, these are the types of things. I mean, we were called Evolve Software. People thought we were a biotech type firm because of the name. So and we weren't. We were actually a project management software solutions company. So it was a lot of education, a lot of cold calling going, what do you mean evolve this? I'm in IT, we don't need any medicine or biotech, So yes, absolutely that happened because people didn't understand it. And it's like a lot of parallels today when you start talking about NFTs and crypto and Web3 and smart contracts. Those words just don't mean anything to people.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of an experience I had, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 months ago, where I was helping somebody research into different like dev options and tech stack options for a project that they were considering. And I spoke with a few different parties, and it became very clear very fast that it was hard to tell the differentiation that existed, is the short version of it, right? So not only did you have possible like terminology issues, which in this case not as much, right, because we had familiarity, but on top of it, like it kind of wasn't clearly identified and communicated. Like we cover from this point to this point. It was kind of a little bit all over the place. And I think it just, in a good way, it presents, in no fault of anybody, but in a good way, it kind of presents a really good opportunity to be that person, right? That can effectively translate, make it easy for people to understand, have it clear in terms of what you're getting, building trust, all those good kinds of things too. It seems like a great opportunity currently. So let's cross the chasm formally and head into Web3 space. So first off, when you crossed into Web3, was it Top Shot? Was it another on-ramp? How did you get into the space originally?
Well, I got into crypto. I mean, that's how I first got into communities, watching YouTube channels, really getting into like Reddit posts, and I had some really good success with trading crypto. I think I started in 2017 or 18. Obviously, I bought, like Bitcoin was the big thing at the time. And, I did it while I was not even a trader. I was more of an investor in crypto. And when I saw my portfolio, go 10X within, a couple months, I was like, man, I want to learn more about this space. And I'll be honest with you, I invested in Bitcoin. I invested heavily in Solana when it was under $5, and I saw those portfolios rise. And then I started hearing about NFTs and this whole Web3, and it wasn't even called Web3 back then. Back then, I'm talking a year, not even a year and a half ago. But people were just saying the NFTs. You got to buy some NFTs, and compared about these Bored Apes. I'm like, oh, it's a pun. And I blew it off like probably most people still do. The normies still do. It's like, oh, that's a scam. It's a Ponzi. And then I started looking at reading some articles, watching some YouTube channels. Then really one thing that got me was when I looked at the OpenSea, and I didn't even know what OpenSea really was at the time, but I looked at OpenSea and saw the whole rankings and the amount of volume that was happening. I'm like, okay, there's something here. This isn't just some fad. There's actual real money being not traded, but the volume I noticed was just kept going up and up, and kind of followed it. And then, I was watching a YouTube channel and, how to get started into NFTs. And I was basically an OpenSea trader for the first couple of weeks. I mean, literally just looking at OpenSea and going, "Oh, this looks cool." Completely the wrong way to go about things. Yeah.
I probably am thinking the same thing, by the way, that other people are thinking listening, which is thank God you mentioned that you traded and bought Solana earlier. Otherwise, it would have been a little bit awkward given your name. So I'm happy to hear that, that side of things.
Everybody asked me that, like, oh, you must know everything about the Solana NFTs. I'm like, well, actually, the name came from because I bought that was my second crypto I ever bought, like with Solana. So that's and then I joined a Discord. They need a name, like, oh, well, Solana's up 50% today. I'll go with that.
Fair enough. So you got your head around NFTs, right? You realized that volume was a thing and that there's obviously something more to it at that point. Where did your head go from there? Like, did your head just go purely into like the trading / investing space? Did it go into looking at these projects and thinking from your background, there is a really immense opportunity that exists here in terms of connecting dots and partnerships and sales and all those kinds of things? Like, what do you remember what you were thinking?
Yeah, I don't. It didn't hit me that this was going to be a space at the time. When the first couple of weeks, I got into it just being a trader, when I wasn't working, my off hours. I was just trading NFTs, not doing very well. And I hadn't really even known what a smart contract was. At that point, I don't even think I was just calling, I didn't even, hadn't heard the term Web3 at the time. But as I got more into this space, and more specifically, finding MVHQ and a bunch of people who know this space real well. And I got lucky. I was watching a YouTube video, and I don't remember who it was. And they had mentioned Metaverse HQ. He was trying to educate people on, how to be a better NFT trader. And he's mentioned in Metaverse HQ saying you really should, join groups like Metaverse HQ because they have expert folks in there that know what they're doing and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, oh, that sounds like something I need to get and at the time it was really expensive. But I said, hey, if I'm going to educate and throw myself, my spare time into this, kind of exciting, growing space, I need to learn it, right? And so at first it was not about bringing any experience. I think in my head, the first couple months, I wanted to just be a really good trader and make money from trading and kind of do that as my side gig.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of finding that too, right? Which is, I definitely heard Mitch say it many a time. And like the concept of like in any new project creators, right? They kind of have to understand what it's like to trade also and what that community is like. Otherwise, how can you create a project that's going to get lift off and then hopefully eventually also be sustainable and all those good kinds of things too. So that makes total sense, of course. Eventually though, that progressed, right? So you traded for a few months, and obviously then your head starts to get around the fact that you see the opportunity that exists, right? Like there's disconnects that exist in terms of partnership opportunities. And even though I think, the MVHQ crew, was in the top 1% in terms of how they pulled that off, outside of that, not so much the case, right? Plenty of opportunity that kind of existed. So what have you seen so far, in the sales and partnerships side of the Web3 space? Like, for instance, what is it like prospecting, qualifying, partnering, or whatever else you're seeing?
Yeah. So there's what's really nice, I think, is, you're in sales every day of your life, whether you realize it or not. When you meet people, you're selling yourself, right?
Mhm.
So I don't want to generalize it, but there's a lot of parallels between, when you're selling yourself or selling a product or, selling anything, selling an NFT well, it might be a little different, but, selling a project to a person, selling an idea, getting people on board. These are all, sales aspects. So what I've found is there's a lot of opportunity in Web3, just in networking alone. As I got more, information in how smart contracts work, how the blockchain works. I started really kind of understanding the opportunities in the space, and seeing kind of trying to formulate in my mind what this space would look like in 5 years. And we can get into that in a little bit. But as far as what how things work now that I'm doing this full time and, prospecting and, collaborating with projects and meeting projects, it is selling, the MVHQ brand. I mean, we are really a brand at this point where I'm getting on a call and I'm selling them on the fact that, hey, we are the 1% of the 1% group. And you want to work with us. You want us to help you and collaborate with you and make sure you're successful, because we're the type of folks that can do that. We have that capability. And so a lot of these, things that I'm doing now aren't too different, than what I was doing back when I was in Web 2. I'm getting on the phone. I'm trying to own the relationship. I'm trying to build trust. I'm trying to sell them on giving them as many spots as possible for MVHQ. And I don't want to be number two. I have that kind of mentality as like, okay, you're giving Ape List 100. Well, why don't we get 150? And I did that very similar in my Web 2 experience. Is like, well, you're looking, at Microsoft. If I was with a startup, well, why aren't you looking at us? We should be at the top of your list. You have to, there's different types of sales styles. I think I can be more aggressive at times when selling whatever it is than passive. So I try to kind of, and different styles work for different people. Sometimes a soft sale, more of a passive attitude works very well. For many people, that's just fits their personality. But I'm finding a lot of the skills that I use when I'm doing, like when I'm on collaboration calls and they have objectives, objections, excuse me, like, oh, your retweets aren't getting as many as possible. I have to find out what that objection is. Yeah, but we're getting 900 plus entries per raffle, in our Discord. So these are, there's a lot of skills that are translating when I'm trying to, when I'm on collaboration calls, trying to sell the MVHQ brand and get whitelist spots or whatever else, or talk about a relationship beyond just allocations, building a strategic partnership. Like, hey, you want to be with us in the long term. Let's talk about, if I know this is a project that's going to be around a while, they're VC backed, they've got a big team, they've got a big vision. This isn't a project that's just going to be a mom and pop or fly by night kind of project. I want to sell them on a strategic partnership. How can we work and make each other successful, years down the road? And what does that look like? Obviously there's going to have to be investment on both parties. So these are a lot of skills that come from just being in sales my whole life, regardless if I was in IT or not. I mean, these are kind of sales skills that cross all industries.
Mhm. And so obviously you have a finite amount of time that exists, right? And so, I think it's you. I think there's several other people on the team. So together you have like a finite amount of bandwidth, right? But how are you thinking about that, managing your time, right? And maybe it's the balance between, nearer term partners versus strategic partners. And then, of course, within there's a qualification process, let's call it, right? In terms of like where we're going to invest more. How do you think of breaking down all your time and focusing it? Do you use a specific rule, for instance, where like 20% of your time is on strategics and 80% is on short term? Do you have rules within there? Like, how do you think about it?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I know so first of all, right now, the way things work in the space in general is very wild, wild west. There are no set, like in the IT world, when I moved from like Oracle to Microsoft, a lot of the same sales processes were in place. Like they're pretty standard. There's things called like the MEDIC sales strategy. That is a standard across many sales organizations. There's none of that in the Web3 space. So one of the things that, I think my predecessors at MVHQ put in some really good processes around, when to enter an opportunity, how to qualify it, what stage it should be in. So those are some of the processes. I'm trying to, refine that even more now and bring it into the space specifically to MVHQ so we can have a better idea of how to manage our time. Because right now, a lot of it is kind of off the cuff. Oh, I got to jump on this call. This project can only meet in the next hour, so I'm going to go jump on a call with them. We're trying to get it more streamlined and process-oriented. Well, if you want to collaborate with us, you should really go through our website and submit an application or the form. Then it'll go to an inside team, or what we call our hunters. Those are folks that are out there actively looking at projects, looking for projects, seeing if their social engagement is good. We've got some, training to go with those folks that teach them what to look in their Discord to see if there's bots, if it's just GM and GN, what type of percentages. So those are the types of things that, we can help streamline. As far as managing my time, I try to, spend the most time to spend with what we call our tier one collab partners and strategic partners. So we have a whole tiering system that we've developed, and this is as of recently, within our databases MVHQ, that kind of categorizes these projects that we're partnering and collaborating with. And if they're tier one, we know we should be on a cadence with them. Some sort of, even if there's no mint coming up or there's nothing really, they're just building right now, we want to make sure we're in touch with those folks, right? So I'm going to spend a portion of my day making sure that if I haven't talked to them in a couple of days, hey, how's it going, guys? Everything going well? Touch base. And we have like tier three. Those are the ones we would rather just do maybe the negotiation of the whitelist spots over Discord chat rather than getting on a call. But I really do try to talk to personally every project we collaborate with, just for security purposes, making sure they're not a scam, making sure that they, if there's a project that doesn't want to get on a call with me, I kind of have to question that. Unless they're minting in the next couple of days and they're super busy, I don't understand why they can't spend some time talking with me face to face, preferably over a video chat. But yeah, as far as like managing time, there are processes that we're bringing in. I try to focus on those tier one projects to follow up for projects that may have less Twitter followers, less engagement. We're not too sure about. We might think about just doing everything over DM rather than scheduling a call and taking a half hour or more out of my day to kind of qualify that.
Yeah, that makes total sense what you're saying. I think there's a wider lesson here also, right? Which is like in this particular case, right? It's from MVHQ, which is as you said, top 1% of 1%, and therefore like quite established and can therefore exert a process like this, right? It's about time efficiency and making sure it's good, and we've seen many projects, and therefore we can do this. But I think the lesson also exists for individuals, and I think we're going to get to this in a little bit because I do want to touch on this other concept. But for anybody who's seeing an opportunity as a result of this conversation, for instance, today, or maybe even others, right? Even if you're just starting with yourself, or even if you're establishing your own brand, right? There's an element of gaining leverage in the marketplace such that you get to control more of how the conversation goes, and therefore be more efficient with your time and be, I guess, elevated to some extent, right, as a brand. So I think there's a good lesson there too, especially as anybody's sprouting businesses out of this and kind of other conversations too. So, Johnny, one other thing that you mentioned as part of this too is you projecting how you think the space will look, 5 years from now too. I assume that's also factoring into like where partners may fall within the tiering system too. I think this is kind of maybe links to your, VC backed or other signals kind of comment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a ton of opportunity in the future in this space. And I think the space is not going to look anywhere near what it does right now than it will 5 years from now. I'm thinking more of the B2B side of things, not just specifically NFTs. I'm thinking the blockchain as a whole. And I think where the big transition is going to come as far as the big companies getting involved with the blockchain is around smart contracts. And I think there's going to be a whole space of not only services like being able to consulting, like, having Solidity developers in your organization who you can consult to, write smart contracts for companies. I'm even thinking products and services related to things around automating proof of ownership, like the pink slip to your car, the deed to your house. Like, if you lose the pink slip to your car, and you want to transfer ownership, where do you have to go? You have to go to the DMV and wait several weeks before you can get a new one. Why? That should all be on the blockchain. You should be able to instantly transfer ownership all through a smart contract. Think of health insurance claims. There shouldn't have to be an adjuster or somebody to deny your claim. If you have a contract with somebody, with an insurance company, and you get cancer, and you are covered by contract for them to pay 80% of the bill or whatever the contract terms are, there should be no adjuster. That should all be automated and on the blockchain. So these are kind of opportunities I'm seeing, and there's going to be so many, and I don't have an idea of what products will be behind this or what kind of organizations will rise from this, but this is going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry, and there's going to be products and services that are absolutely going to need sales folks and other marketing, you name it, devs, all of it to sell to them. So I'm thinking way beyond just NFTs in my mind, as far as opportunities in this space. I mean, these are going to be companies that didn't even exist with any type of plan like this. And I'm talking probably, years and years down the line, maybe 5 years, but it'll be here, before we know it.
Yeah. And just building on what you're saying, I think it maybe not just multi-billion, like multi-trillion, I think, right? Because it's taking over so many different, approaches, let's say antiquated approaches and otherwise that are existing already with huge industries. Yeah, maybe even more like trillions. So a couple live audience questions we've got coming in. So first off, Scott goes asking, when you're on project collab calls, and I think this could be pointed at projects, you can go wider than projects too for like, tier A partners and services and things like that. But Scott goes asking, are you able to get a feel for which teams seem poised to do better than others? And then equally, after talking to so many projects, have any surprised you or outperformed expectations?
I'll take it in order. So yes, now that I've gotten a ton of these under my belt, I know I can tell within 5 minutes whether it's going to be tier 1, 2, or 3. And that's kind of how we've broken them up right now. Just based on, well, obviously I don't go into the call without doing a little research, right? I do go to their Twitter, I do go to their website, I do go to their Discord. If barring time, I try to do as much research as I can. Sometimes calls are back to back, and I have to do them in the morning or I don't have enough time. But for the most part, that is something that everybody should do if you're in sales, is know your customer, know what you're walking into, how many people are going to be on the call, how many people have accepted. These are kind of sales 101 things, but I like to really make sure I know as much as I can going into the project. So you have a pretty good idea sometimes just walking in, but then there's other, signals on how enthusiastic is this person talking to me about their project? Are they passionate? Do they sound shady? You can tell, if like for the other day, I got on a call and two of the founders and one marketing person and their lead developer were on the call, like on video. I knew right there that they were serious. They were taking this call seriously. Another call I got on where the guy kept canceling on me and he didn't want to put on his video camera, and we finally rescheduled a time that was a crazy time for me. And he got on. It just sounded, I could just tell he just was not passionate. He didn't really have a plan. So now, and I'll say in the beginning, I probably was a little bit not as tuned in on which projects, were going to be good versus which projects were kind of maybe more ruggy or, were cash grabby. But now I can definitely tell that, and that's just, with experience. But a lot of that, I think, but at the same time, I think I accelerated that to get to that stage based on my past sales experience. It just had to translate into kind of Web3 terminology and how the space works and how people work in this space, because it's a lot different than how it is. There's not a lot of professionalism in the space. But as far as projects, overperforming or underperforming, I'm still tuning that. And what's unfortunate, or more fortunate, because maybe it's making me a better trader, is that it depends so much on market conditions. For example, we'll take the other day, Gangsta My City. Great team, loved the project. I did not think they were going to sell out. I thought that it was around a 0.04 price. I thought that, I seen the demo of the game a couple of weekends ago. I thought it was okay. I thought that, kind of the P to E meta was fading. I thought they, didn't have the engagement. I thought they would do okay. I thought they would have to cut supply or price, but I did not think they'd be, they mooned yesterday. I don't know what they're at today, but, they sold out pretty quickly. It was all paid mint. I don't think there were any free mints, or very few. Maybe they had a couple in their vault or their treasury that they're holding, but I was shocked by that. And then there's other ones that I thought would do real well. And then after talking to you guys in VC, I learned, man, I should have really thought about that. Maybe I was too bullish. We'll take B-Bots, for example. I thought that would do really well, but, based on my conversations with them, VC backed, top tier C-level executives from Web 2 companies. Seth Green's studio engaged on the project and pushing the project behind the project. And then, they did horrible, and they're still horrible. But I learned after the AMA, listening to some of the comments and in the VC chat room that, you guys had questions around, the reveal process was in phases, or, their mint price awfully high in this market. And I probably should have put more thought into that because I was way off on that one. So I'm still learning. But, those are two recent examples.
It's interesting. Are you, out of curiosity, are you getting resistance from partners in terms of having video calls? Like, given the nature of Web3, of course, and doxing, not doxing, that kind of thing. Are you getting resistance in that? Are people, like, what's the latest pulse on that? Are people increasingly receptive to doing video calls? Like, how is that lately?
Well, we don't force them to turn on their video camera. And it's kind of an unspoken rule that you don't ask for it. Like, if they want to turn it on, they can turn it on. If they don't, they don't. Either way, I don't care. I just want to be able to speak to somebody real, making sure that they're willing to put themselves out there on a call. But I would say it's about 55, 45, 55% of the time people are on video, 45% they just are on voice. Well, and there's always the 5% that won't even do a call, so we try to avoid them unless there's a compelling reason why they won't want to do a voice call, or get on Google Meet, is because they don't speak English well. Okay, that will make that exception. Obviously, there are a percentage of those, like, especially in Asia Pac, where they just don't feel comfortable speaking English. We will happily do a collaboration over DM if that's the case, but at least tell us that, right? If you're not going to say that. But I would say, as far as, every other call that I have, about 55% they're on video, 45% they're on voice, but they don't turn on their camera. I always have my camera on. I try to, unless I'm, running around doing something, but I try to have my camera on just to make them feel comfortable, make them know. I think it actually puts you in a position of power when your camera's on and they're not, actually, from a sales perspective.
That's too funny. Do you think, given the 55-45 that you said now, do you think that's a signal for kind of times evolving within Web3, right? And like moving away from doxing, undoxing, that side of things? I will say, I have this working thesis that, and I'm gonna get a tomato thrown at me here in the background, but I have this working thesis that Web3 is moving more closely in the direction of Web2 and how that operates. And then Web2 is moving more closely in the direction of Web3 and how that operates. And they're kind of coming together a little bit more. But at fear of getting a tomato thrown at me, what do you think? Is the 55-45 a signal that people are getting more open to having to share their backgrounds, their names, things like that, for trust purposes, for business purposes? Or is it just the way it is and you don't think it's prone to adjust?
Well, I'm not going to speak to where Web3 or Web2 has been evolving, because I haven't been in Web2 for like 9 months now. But I will speak where I think what's the trends are happening on my Web3 type calls and NFT calls with projects and prospecting. I do think that it is moving into a more traditional Web2 type of attitude and type of processes that are being put in place. So one of the things I do bring up now that I didn't bring up, let's say even a month ago when I get on calls, is I tell people, when I introduce MVHQ, I say I'm trying to bring some more professionalism into this space. This is one of the reasons why we're having the call. Beyond the fact that we want to get to know you, I would love to get you. I'm sure you want to get to know us. And we want to make sure everything's on the up and up, and this isn't a rug pull or a scam. People appreciate that more and more. I could even say within the last week, I would say maybe close to half my calls, once I mention that, they follow up with, after I'm done, go, we really like that you told us you're trying to bring more professionalism into the space, either because A, they're trying to do it themselves, or B, they're almost kind of seeing more and more projects they're working with implement these type of processes and procedures. So I definitely would agree that, and it's not like a snowball, it's still slow, but I think there is more and more kind of professionalism being brought into this space. And hopefully that's going to cut down on scams and cash grabs and rug pulls, being able the space governing itself.
Yeah, I can imagine that can also scare some people too, right? Because like that could be heard and construed as, we're losing a lot of the awesome Web3 centric things that we have, including, privacy and the way, communities are built and kind of trust and all, trust or trustlessness, either way, things like that, right? It could feel like some of those things are kind of going away, when in reality, I don't think it's that. I mean, it's still the same innovation and great foundations that we built, but I guess it just was like a scammy context in general. And that's not, for excellent, amazing performing places like MVHQ and other places, not the case, right? And for that top 1%, but I guess for the other 99, it's just a cold hard fact.
And I think there's a balancing act too, because with anonymity comes more security risk, because especially when you're trying to collaborate and build partnerships, if you introduce a much higher chance of one party trying to scam or pull the rug under the other party when it's more anonymous than it is if they both are doxed to know each other, right? So it's a balancing act. And I think it's going to take on its own kind of form at some point, and I don't think it'll be all Web 2 or it'll be a mixture of both, right? Where like as I mentioned, it's not required that you get on camera. I'm not going to say anything if you don't. I am, and I don't think we're ever going to get to back to the old school IT days where people were in suits and ties. I mean, we're never going to get there. That's never coming back. But I think there will be kind of a mix, kind of a hybrid.
Yeah. You can envision a world too, though, where there's like a soulbound token that exists, right? That has some kind of incentive system attached to it, but also included in there is your reputation score, that kind of thing. So enabling you to stay anonymous in theory, but also having something to be able to remove some of the pains that exist within the space too. Maybe there's some approach in that direction that's happening.
Absolutely. I've thought about something like that along those terms. And some sort of, anonymous identity that tracks your, not who you are, but what you're about, what your values are, how trusted you are, et cetera. Yeah, totally.
Another question from the crowd is about sales approach, really. So consultative versus, I guess, a bit more, let's call it proactive, assertive type approach. So are you finding in your experience that, a consultative approach, if you don't need my services, won't sell you? This is kind of what Ryan H is saying, but more of a consultative approach functions. Does it tend to be more of an assertive approach since it's not as organized, let's say? I mean, what has your experience been?
Yeah, I think right now it is more the assertive approach, because of the fact there isn't, we're not, once more products in the space evolves, there will be more what we call in the IT space solution selling, where you're finding problems or you're building solutions to meet a problem or a need in the market. And, the more flexible your solution, the more you're going to be able to adapt and be able to, have your solution meet the problems that are in the space. So I think that is coming as more products, as more services come out in smart contracts, Web3, maybe even NFTs. But right now it is more of a more tactical sale, where you're getting on, like my day-to-day is much more tactical. And there are strategic elements, don't get me wrong, especially with strategic partnerships, when we're talking that. But from right now on most of my calls, I'm much more tactical in trying to just not educate, first and foremost, making sure they understand that they're talking to the best alpha group on the market in the space today, and I want to make them feel like, hey, you should be privileged that you're speaking to us, and that we may want to do a collab with you. So it is much more aggressive, might not be the right word, but more firm. I'm trying to establish the hierarchy when getting on these calls. Like, you're not just talking to mom and pop project that has an alpha community that minted a month ago. We've been around, we have the OGs, we've got the names and the partnerships behind us that make it so you're going to want to partner with us by the end of this 30 minutes.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That kind of reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Dazed and Confused, or if anybody on's ever seen Dazed and Confused. I'm sure some chunk of people have. And he's kind of like mentoring the young guy when he comes in, because there's this girl that likes him, and he's like, you got to play it cool, kind of a thing, right? So the kind of message he gives back, which is like, I don't know if I'm going to be at the party, but maybe I'll see you over there, kind of a thing, and keeping it cool, taking that kind of elevated approach.
I remember that movie. I don't remember that part, but I watched. Back in my day, I watched Dazed and Confused quite a bit.
Too funny. So, all right, let's get into dollars for a second here and try to hunt dollars for anybody who's listening and maybe wants to hear some opportunities, just in case you have anything in mind. So if somebody's listening to this right now and they're saying, okay, I'm trading, I'm investing, that kind of a thing, but I'm also looking to be able to make some money too. I know it's the Wild West still in the space. I know there's still lots of opportunities to connect, things like, is there an opportunity that you see that's out there that's like kind of still unfulfilled, maybe from the sales standpoint or partnership standpoint or, lead gen standpoint or whatever? Is there anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sales opportunity now during the bull market, which I missed, by the way, I didn't start MVHQ until about 5 months ago or so, and that if you were in like a part of a collaboration team or sales team during the bull market, you can make more than you can in Web 2, because one of the incentives that you get is if you close a deal or even bring a deal to the table, you get a certain number of whitelist spots, 1 to 2, maybe 3, depends on the organization, depends on the market. But a lot of people were doing real well just being hunters. They would go out, find projects, bring them to their particular alpha group, or there's an MVHQ or whoever, make that introduction because they found the collab manager or the founder via Twitter or Discord, and they would get eyes on it from that alpha group, be able to set up a negotiation call or a discovery call, whatever you want to call it. And they would get, they could make a really good living just getting free whitelist. If let's say, for example, Gangsta Mice, before they minted yesterday or the other day, hadn't collaborated with the Underground, and you brought that to them, well, you would get maybe a couple whitelist spots from them, almost like a referral fee for bringing that to them. Same with we have a hunter group in MVHQ. They get incentivized through whitelist spots as well as some other benefits, being as part of the staff. But they, get, if they bring it to us and, we decide to move forward with collaboration, they get a whitelist. So that's kind of their incentive. So, you find, blue chips. Now during the bear, it's a little harder, right? Because projects aren't minting out and a lot of them, don't do well post-mint. So it's a little bit harder, but, as the space gets back and we're getting back in the bull market, I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities, going to be a lot more projects. You need to be able to scale. This is definitely not a scalable, we need people. You're going to need people because through the amount of projects that will be coming out as we get back into the bull market again, people have put off their mints and gone quiet as well. So that's one way.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Johnny.
No, and I'm also saying I think the future, like as companies emerge in as I mentioned, in kind of the smart contract blockchain, they're going to need people who have the network. And I think one of the best things about being in any type of role in Web3, even if you're part-time, working for a project, be a moderator, not only like, some of these smaller incentive, but the real value is in building your relationships, like getting to meet project founders that could potentially be ahead of a, $1 billion project, someday is pretty empowering. And just the amount of connections I've made in my short amount of time is pretty overwhelming. Like, some of these projects that have done pretty well. Like, I'm talking to, several projects that like, the founder, Carl from 247 Comics, me and him change DMs all the time because he's asking me about ideas. What other groups should he be talking to? How the community is feeling about us. That's just very empowering. And that's just one example. There's a lot more projects. You get to build these relationships. And this is kind of the future of Web3. These people are going to be around. These founders and people who are entrepreneurs are going to be around in Web3 for a while. And to get to have a relationship with them, I think is going to be invaluable long term.
Yeah, and I think that goes in both directions too, right? So for every, like you're saying, alpha group or continuous group that kind of exists, right? There's also every day new projects that are coming out, right? And what's their problem? They need to sell out their projects, right? Like they need strategic relationships to be able to sell out their projects. So I still think that's like an endless supply of need that kind of exists in opportunity. Also, the other place that's going to, already exists, but is going to emerge more and more is on the tools and kind of SaaS side of things, like you were saying, right? So anybody who's creating tools or software or that could plug into a variety of communities, right? In even more of a case, we'll need to have those strategic relationships and partnerships, which seems like a very, very big opportunity too, no?
Yeah. Take like Blur, take Lo-Fi EQ. I mean, that took selling. I mean, that was not. I mean, and maybe it was the founders doing the selling, but at some point, you're going to need to scale and get sales teams to do that. marketing as well. It's going to be a huge consulting. Right now, I'm actually talking to a lot more projects. I'm going to say a lot, but they're representing. So they're the consulting firm representing the brand behind them. So I was just on a call this morning, famous Japanese singer. I don't remember her name, but they're the consultant. They're doing her project, her NFT drop. They are the group that's doing it. Her organization hired this company to do their all the from the marketing in the NFT space to the smart contract building, et cetera, et cetera. They got several other existing high profile project clients too that I was shocked about. And I'm like, wow, they're building and they said they pulled in between Web 2 and Web 3, this consulting company pulled in $60 million last year.
Wow. That is, that's no joke. And I'm glad that plants the carrot for everyone listening who's trying to figure out their next project or side business or whatever. I mean, it's like, look, one route is trading and investing. Another route is creating an NFT project, of course, as we know. There's another route, right, which is setting up like a services organization that could make a ton of money within this space. That's a really, really good route too.
How many projects do you see right now falling on their face because they did not get, and we talk about it even in voice chat. Man, they didn't ask any, the people that have been in this space how they should be doing things, what they should be pricing things at. There's going to be multiple of these kind of consulting organizations that are going to be old traders and know the space, know the people, know how to market the product or the NFT to the Web3 community. They're going to be making a ton of money. I guarantee it, because there's too many projects that are screwing it up. Like Bebots, for example, they should have hired somebody to tell them, hey, this might be a little higher. You might want to wait a couple more weeks and build the community up because you don't have enough socials. You guys just, got out of stealth a month ago. There's a lot of things that they could have done better. And there's going to be a lot more of these type of organizations and companies that get paid buco bucks to do that.
I mean, yeah, in some cases, maybe they need like a consultant that comes before a consultant, like an emotional consultant to convince them that they need a consultant so that they can even get to that point.
Exactly.
To be honest with you. That's really good stuff. And I think it's just a really, really big opportunity that existed. That, by the way, is parallel in the Web 2 world, right? I mean, the other thing I want to call out too is, like, I know many people's visceral reactions, I always run into this problem also, is as you start to hear like, oh, there's going to be consulting, plenty of consulting organizations or consulting businesses that kind of crop up, like the natural reaction to that might be that's scary, like it's competition. Is it going to be too crowded? That kind of, it's in reality, I think it's the opposite, right? I think it's more consulting businesses doing this at this stage means more people are aware, more people are posting on LinkedIn, places like that, right, which is going to grow the pie for everybody. So I think it's, even more of a reason why there's opportunity, even if you're seeing other people doing things that are similar to what you're doing in the near term, right? There's still like midterm opportunity that exists too.
You think, as the market grows, the amount of folks and organizations, companies that are going to be the need's going to be there. When I was at HPE, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, we had over 10,000 partners that helped sell our products and services. Like, so don't think that there's not going to be room if the space, it's going to grow with the space. So I think at Microsoft, we had like over 50,000. I don't remember. I don't want to quote that, but I remember specifically at HP, we had like 10,000 partners. In Microsoft, I'm sure we had 50,000. So, it's going to scale with the market.
Yeah. So cognizant of time here, Johnny, last question for you, and you can answer this however you want to answer this. So it could be about sales, it could be as a trader, whatever you want. What are you most excited about in terms of opportunity in the space?
I mean, to be honest with you, I'm excited about the whole space. Every day I come up with a new idea or a new, like, oh my gosh, the smart chain can solve this idea. Like some of the examples I gave about, the pink slip to your car, deed to your house, health insurance claims, car adjustment, accidents. I'm getting into pieces of artwork and proof of authenticity all being on the blockchain. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So my most exciting thing is not knowing what the next big thing is going to be, but I know it's going to be on the blockchain. That's what excites me. I don't know what it is. And I wish I did, because I'd be, I would be retired and owning Web3 companies myself. But I know it's there. And just thinking about those ideas every morning, a new idea, not every morning, but when a new idea kind of starts rolling around in my mind, I'm like, that gets me excited. And as far as opportunities, they're everywhere. I mean, even, from trading to networking to getting involved with, it's not hard to get a job in Web3 if you're willing to dedicate the time, or even your spare time. They're not even full-time job requirements. There's no sales quotas. There's no, you're not going to get fired, unless you screw over the project. You're not going to get, it's so forgiving that I think whether it's marketing, whether it's being a moderator, whether it's, helping them get connected to other projects and just building relationships. There's all types of ways to be successful. And I think those are going to lead naturally into, roles within Web3 companies in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I join you in saying, I'm equally excited to see what comes out. Even if you feel like you have a pulse on some ideas, like you're saying, there's always, bazillion other people who are thinking in all sorts of different ways too. It's super cool. And it's always the kind of thing too, where in most cases, after it comes out, you're like, oh yeah, I should have seen I should have seen that coming. How come I didn't think about that also? But I guess that's what happens when there's so many people thinking about the space. Well, this was absolutely awesome conversation, Johnny, man. Thank you so much for joining. Much appreciated. For everybody who's listening live, thank you so much for joining also, and for live questions. Really appreciate that too. And for anybody, I guess, who's hearing on recorded too, thanks for tuning in that way. We really appreciate your support from that side of things. And we'll be, similar time next week on Thursday. We'll be continuing on into episode 25. So thanks so much, everyone. And we'll see you down in VC1. Thanks.